So hopefully everything works out. This is my first time using this particular system and doing a webinar. So let's get started.
I noticed a change with your smart home preferences. Should I apply them?
All right. I just wanted to tease you guys with a little bit of what's to come. Here's what you can expect, right? So I'm going to show you guys how to develop a bit of, I use advanced with air quotes, but advanced in the sense that we haven't really seen anyone do this type of stuff, and I'm sure that there's other folks out there that's exploring just as deep as I am, but I want to at least show you new ways in which you can utilize AI within your smart home automations that can rival what you see with Google, Lady A, and the other smart home platforms out there. Something cool about this is that this webinar is, you're going to learn about what I refer to as the 3 Rs. You're going to hear about the Oh No stack. And again, these are kitschy names, but you're going to see how they all come together. And the concept of building an agentic automation. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard about AI agents or agentic, like these buzzwords that's out there. And what I find interesting about it is that not many people really know what it means. Like, you have AI agents, but then when you hear people actually describe it, they're just describing just a regular workflow. It's not really. And just to show you how nebulous it is, even people at my job, like Amazon, they use these words and they're also using it very incorrectly. So it's everyone is still trying to figure it out. Everyone is trying to figure out, like, where does this fit in? And I'm sure that companies are going to find ways to use it for their benefit. I'm just interested as to how can it help me in my home and solve everyday things for me. And by proxy, I'm hoping that the things that I've learned, it may be helpful for you guys too as well. So with that in mind, some of you may have seen or heard of it. This is essentially a let's call it a course. I have no a better way of putting it, but this is something that I've been exploring, and I'm trying to consolidate all the things that I've been learning and kind of putting it into this one place where people can kind of go through and figure it out for themselves. The thing is that there's so much to it, and the AI space is moving so fast that I find that when I'm just throwing YouTube videos out, it's just causing more questions, and of course I'm not in charge of the algorithm, so people aren't seeing things in order. So I'm trying to create like a consistent, consolidated space where people can go from beginning to end and see this is how you can approach it. These are the techniques, some of the skill sets, and what I'm also hoping with this is that the skill sets learned are skill sets that can be applied not just in this moment, but should withstand the test of time. And that test of time is still relative, but at least it should last and apply to just more than just what we see today. So this webinar is based off of this Jarvis Blueprint. And again, I mentioned the 3 Rs that's taught inside that course. I'm going to go through some of that here as well, so you guys can kind of see the thought patterns as to how I go through creating and utilizing AI within the space. Let's see. But I guess Jarvis Blueprint is kind of let's call it a buzzword too as well, and it's also kind of nebulous in the sense of, like, why would I call it that? And all this is just simply a framework that will show you how to interconnect AI-powered automations. Right now, usually we just create one automation. They're like one-off tasks or one-off sets of tasks. But what I'm finding is that when introducing AI or just thinking of, because of AI, it allowed me to think of automations differently. And then as a result, the way that I structure my automations now it's fascinating. It's fascinating, and I'm finding that it's a lot easier for me to maintain everything, as well as to expand on it really rapidly and still give me a good line of sight when things go wrong. So big benefits that you're going to see out of this is that it's going to just show you a new way of doing things. And if you're not interested in AI, that's cool. what you're going to get at least are the techniques that's used within this. You can use it and apply it to even everyday standard automations. And at the end of this webinar, I have a special bonus for those of you that are that haven't subscribed to the community and aren't full members. This special bonus is for you guys. Essentially, you're going to get at the end a 6-month trial that is going to give you complete access, and that complete access will give you access to this webinar again. I'm recording it, and it's going to be placed inside the community, so you'll be able to access that, and there's going to be a code for you to utilize. And you're going to have access additionally to the curated automation library, private discussion board, and again, this webinar and the contents of this webinar. So the automations that you see here, I'm going to have output of that, so that way you can upload it to your Node-RED instances, so you don't have to like record this or stop and pause this to replay or figure it out yourself. I'm going to give you everything. You can just import it, and you should just be able to run with that. All right. Small housekeeping for those of you that don't know me or have seen me for the first time. My name is Michael Montague. I'm a software engineer for about 13 years, probably 14 now. I lost track of time, to be honest. For about 8 years, I've been dabbling in the smart home tech space. It started off really simple, as I've seen some of you in the chat where it said, it started off with just lights. I was in a small apartment. I just wanted to automate some of the lights and the fans, and started with that. Then it turned to locks. Then it just turned into so much more. It's a rabbit hole. So I feel like we all kind of go down that rabbit hole at some point. And then I have a little falling off with it, right? So there's a part where it's like, I don't want to deal with this. And then you start to see things advance. Home Assistant start doing its thing. And I'm like, all right, now I got to come back. So here I am again. And I'm hoping that the stuff that I've learned along the way that you guys can find super useful. I don't like to call myself a content creator, but I guess since I've been doing it this long now, I guess I am that. And of course, I'm a husband and a father as well. One daughter. She is very cute. All right, so why AI automation? Now, if you're wondering about the benefits of utilizing AI in your home, there are a few. There's also a lot of downsides, but first I want to look at the pros. And one of the things that I've been trying to explore is the fact that since AI can do a lot of the quote unquote thinking for you, it can simplify a lot of complex interactions. So things that would be hard to do using hard coding or doing it manually with a bunch of if else, I find that AI can shortcut through all of that and make it very simple. So in certain cases, I've seen the amount of code that I would need to develop a particular automation becomes drastically less. Utilizing AI also unlocked a bunch of new triggers for me as well. Triggers as, let's say, motion sensor events, maybe time events, different things in which you would see within Home Assistant you can use to trigger your automations. AI provides a new category as well. You're going to kind of see that in a little bit later. And then the last two is basically personalization. The first thing that I've seen when getting into the smart home space is everyone wants to build their own Jarvis or their own personalized living environment that seems to have a personality of its own. Prior to all of this, you have to be that personality. You have to hard code like the witty responses. You have to hard code how it responds in specific situations. And some of you may understand when I say this. You may have like a bank of text, of strings for particular situations that you would randomize through and have it respond. And then there may be dynamic elements in it where it would put its own, I guess, wit in. This simplifies all of that. You don't have to think about it. You can just say, hey, have this personality. It'll do it. And then lastly, the one that I'm most excited about is that this is so new and unexplored. This is, in my opinion, the Wild West. In the same way that I remember growing up thinking like, I was too young when the whole .com era kind of bloomed into fruition. And there's a lot of folks that pioneered a lot of cool stuff. So you saw how the social media companies came to arise in like the early 2000s. And when you look back, you're like, yeah, that makes sense, right? Like if you're in this space, like the way that they utilize the text makes sense. It was clever at the time, but it made sense. And we look back in I guess hindsight and say that, if only that was me. This is that moment now. AI is so new that if you were to look back, you have the ability to shape it the way that you want to, and people will look back at you and say, "Oh man, if only like it was such an easy concept. The bar is so low. I wish I was there. We're here. We're here now. We can do it." So I'm excited. This is new and unexplored. We get to make it what we want. All right, but then that kind of goes down to the downsides of AI. It is complex and it is overkill if used incorrectly. I've seen because personally I have, when exploring this, overcomplicated a lot of my automations, and that's part of learning. That's the part of the learning process. So you can see how far you can take it, how far can it go, and by doing that, you shed light on the areas that both are bad but also that are very good, and you just have to find one good spot to realize its use. So with that being said, how do you fight against the problem of complexity and it being overkill in certain cases? And the way that I found to overcome that is with the 3 R's. Now, I find that these 3 R's drastically reduced or simplified the way that I saw automations and how I approached it. And it was made possible by the Ono stack. Again, all of these are going to sound strange, but they're going to make sense as I move forward. So I'm going to introduce to you the Jarvis Blueprint. This is a sneak peek, I guess, into the course. I'm currently making it. It is under development, but I have several of the videos kind of scoped out, and I wanted you guys to be the very first to see it. Uh, this is going to explain for you the 3 R's and how it works. Uh, I guess with that being said, let's just jump right into it. I created an AI smart home assistant that stomps on the smart home cartel. It can do all the typical smart home actions like lock doors, change lights, set timers, but there are things that the smart home cartel can do that my system can't. But what gives my smart home the advantage, in my humble opinion, is how it can learn new skills. And your smart home has the same ability too. Every time you add a new integration or create a new automation, your smart home becomes next level. By extension, so does Jarvis. Remember my definition for a Jarvis? A collection of well-timed automations? Yeah, that definition. So the more automations you add, the more Jarvis theoretically can do. But you might be thinking to yourself, well, every smart home platform lets you add more integrations and automations, and they still don't feel like Jarvis. Heck, even my system doesn't feel like Jarvis. And you're kind of correct. When we make an automation, it typically feels disconnected. For example, if I make a new automation that can tell if the recycle has been picked up this week, that's all the automation can really do. It's just another automation that sits among the rest waiting for a specific trigger to call it. So how do you push all of these automations together to create the feeling or the experience of Jarvis? This is where we need the Jarvis Blueprint. The Jarvis Blueprint consists of 3 R's: reading, reasoning, and responding. Currently, your automations are one-off actions that have one or more triggers with some conditions. However, this simplistic blueprint helps you to think of your automations in a way that allows automations to be reused. Since Jarvis is a collection of automations, each automation needs to be built in a way that allows it to be used in a chain. And it starts with the first R, reading. Reading is the first step, and it represents how Jarvis is activated. This can vary from text, voice, or even physical buttons. It's how your smart home can take in information and execute tasks, and we commonly know this as a trigger. The big difference, though, between regular triggers and Jarvis triggers is that the Jarvis triggers are completely dynamic and they usually convert into executable text. A straightforward example of this would be, let's say, typing a greeting into Assist. A complex example would be an automatic timer that kicks off a process where that automation reads the action in a stack and then continues where it last left off. You can even have cases where no text is given, like for instance, pressing a button to initiate a lockdown sequence, which then segues to my next R, reason. Reasoning represents the business logic that is executed based on the input from the previous step. The business logic is the part of the automation that never changes and does the desired action. Now, this may sound no different than the action section in defining an automation in Home Assistant, and technically you'd be right mostly. The catch is that the business logic must be independent of the triggers. If you want a smart home that feels like Jarvis, then this must hold true because you will never know how the logic will be triggered. Imagine if you have an automation that triggers the lockdown sequence. The business logic is as followed. Check all the windows and doors are closed. Set the alarm to away. Monitor activity from motion detectors and cameras. And you can currently activate this automations in one of two ways, by either pressing a button on your dashboard or by pressing a smart button by your front door. Currently, this automation does not feel very Jarvis-y. And mind you, it works, but it just doesn't feel responsive. It feels pretty sterile. So you decide to add two additional triggers. One trigger is voice related, where you can say anything from I'm leaving to lock up the house for me, and the lockdown business logic would fire. The other trigger is more automatic. If the home detects, let's say, no presence in the house for a period of time and the alarm is not active, then it would prompt you if it should lock up. And notice that the only thing that really changed in this whole interaction is how the logic was triggered. The business logic didn't change at all. This modular approach is important because it makes it easy for us to extend how we interact with our smart home, and it helps us to add new business logic without having to affect any of the existing triggers or business logic. Here's one more caveat though. The business logic is also separate from the delivery, which leads to the final R. Responding. Responding is the last R that represents how the home responds back to you. You could start an automation via a button press, but then it responds back via voice. You could start via text, and then the automation could end via text. How you end the automation will depend on how you start the automation and the context of the automation itself. For example, I have an automation that starts via voice. I can tell my smart home to open up a document, which lets the smart home temporarily get smarter based off of the contents within that document. But what if the smart home finds two or more documents that match what I was asking for? Then instead of responding by only voice, it also responds via text, telling me that it sent the matching documents to my phone and I should choose the one that best match. Once I select the document on my phone, it responds back via text and voice. If the interaction only happened via voice, it would make for a very terrible experience. Because what happens if, let's say, it found 10 matching documents? Would it read all 10 documents via voice? Absurd. So these three R's, reading, reasoning, and responding, helps us to think of our automations modularly. This modular approach lets us create automations with multiple triggers and business logic and outputs that can be mixed and matched, which is how we start to turn our automations into a collection of well-timed automations. So with the three R's, you have reading, reasoning, and responding. And what I'm finding with that is that it lets you separate the concerns out. Particularly, it lets you, one, make it very easy to see when things are going wrong, and it also makes it very easy for you to expand rapidly and with precision. So for instance, because you have one way of taking in information into your smart home, you have that information that comes in. Your reasoning aspect can now branch out independently of how information comes in. So what that tends to look like is let's say you have things come in via text. Based off of that text, you can have one or more different automations fire, and you can see very clearly how that kind of moves throughout the system. And because Node-RED is pretty visual, what you tend to find as well is that it's easy to locate where there's too much over engineering, if you will. If you start to see a lot of nodes clustered together, you can tell that, hey, there's probably too much happening with this particular business logic, so then it needs to branch out and split those concerns out a little bit more. And it makes it easy again to see where things go wrong. So if, let's say, an automation didn't fire correctly or didn't start, I'm pretty sure that something happened during the reading phase. Whereas if the automation didn't end the way that it was supposed to, chances are probably something went wrong between the reasoning and the responding phase. But having it separated out makes it very easy, I find, for developing automations and creating new ones, as well as removing old ones, and doing that without affecting other automations. And I'm pretty sure you've seen, if you had, let's say, interconnecting automations, those automations would, because they're so tightly coupled, if you change one thing in one automation, several other automations go down, and we kind of refer to that as like spaghetti code. Having it this way lets you decouple it and have high cohesion but low coupling. All right, and then the Ono stack. This is just my way of implementing a version of this. You don't have to use these particular sets of tools or frameworks, but this is just the one that I currently use that I found to be pretty effective. So you have Obsidian, which is acting like the storage device, and it also acts as a trigger, and AI helps enable that to happen. You have Home Assistant, which is the interface that connects all of the devices and makes your smart home connected to everything else that's around here. Node-RED is the controller or the business logic, for me at least. It contains all of the logic necessary to run the automations. And then we have AI, which is uh, just technically optional. And whether you use Olama, whether you use OpenAI, Gemini, Claude, whatever the case is, that section is optional, but it is the gasoline to this fire that makes everything ignite. And like gasoline and fire, if you do it incorrectly, definitely you're going to have things blow up. But in proper doses, I find that it can be extremely effective. And the use case that I'm going to show you at the end definitely demonstrates that. So let's talk about the reading phase. Within the reading phase, you can have many different inputs, and it's basically categorized as triggers and outputs. For within the reading phase, you have, let's say, the triggers can be webhooks. Let's see if the mouse works. It kind of works. You can have webhooks, so something comes from a phone or from a website. You can have something that's text, so in this case, like Obsidian. You can have voice, and that voice gets translated into text. Or you can have something time-based, or you can go even more nebulous or niche, and you can do things like buttons, motions, presence, temperatures, anything really. But you have some trigger, and when that trigger comes through, the goal of the reading phase is that it must translate whatever needs to happen into text. It needs to output text at the end of the reading phase because that's what the next phase is going to utilize in order to kick off the process. So again, reading, you have some trigger and it has some command output that is text. So an example would be, let's say you enter a room and a motion trigger or a motion sensor triggers an automation. The output from that section would be instructions of what should be done with that motion sensor, as opposed to what we see now, where you have a motion sensor and then you would manually say, or you would manually create an automation that says, when a motion trigger hits, turn on this light. Again, I'm kind of using a very loose example, but the idea is that instead of you hard coding to say, hey, turn on this particular light for this room, it just resolves to text where you say, turn on this light for this room. Additionally, one thing that I would like to call out with this section is that you could end up having additional context that come with that command. So let's say for that same command of turn on the light in this room or in the master bedroom, you may also present with it metadata such as who's the one that made the command, where are you in the room, so where was this command triggered, and other information like that, because when AI utilizes it, that kind of helps makes it a little bit more personal, and the additional context is always very helpful as it helps narrow down what it needs to do. So to kind of show you how you can get this started, we're going to basically be using Obsidian to unlock. We're going to use Obsidian as a way to trigger your automations, as well as to make it generate commands. And we're going to do this via the local REST API plugin. I don't know, I think someone within the community, I don't remember who, put me onto it. But this plugin definitely simplifies a lot of things and makes what you're going to see possible. So here, this is the local REST API. If you want to search for it yourself within Obsidian, you can. It's downloadable. It's free. Just to kind of give you a sense as to how this works, my favorite page for this is that they have this playground, if you will, that lets you test out the commands. And what the local REST API does is it actually sets up like a server, like a mini server underneath Obsidian that lets you ping it. So here's how it works. Let's see if this would play. Right. So when you come through, you would basically say, hey, set this as HTTP. You're basically setting the security of it. And we need to authorize it because this does use a security token. Once you do that, you can just paste it in, and you'll see that once you install it within Obsidian, I'm not showing that part yet, but once you go into Obsidian and you install that particular plugin, you're going to see very clearly the token that you would need to paste in. But on this page, you're going to also be able to utilize it and get all of these commands, like for instance, get active file. And within Obsidian, your active file is the one that is the window that is currently open. So you can say to it, hey, I want to get the contents of this file. When you click try out, actually first, I personally like to use a markdown. That's my personal preference. But you can go through, and once you execute it, what you're going to see here is that here's the curl request. If those of you who are comfortable with terminal and just what you see here, this is probably for you. If everything that I'm saying right now sounds like some kind of weird new language, this plugin may not be for you, and that's okay. I do have a separate plugin that's within the community that does allow you to utilize Node Obsidian without needing to do all of this. It just abstracts it and hides it from you, and it still lets you ping it and get information. It's not going to be as robust as this, but it still gets the job done. But for those of you that are seeing this and are getting excited, hey, let's go into it. So as you can see here, I told it to get the active file, and for me, it got it. It was able to get the particular files, and this is all the information that's within it. And this is what makes it kind of interesting, because now, because we can see the contents of the files, this kind of unlocks a whole new dimension as to what you can do. Reasonably, you would use, let's say, like SQL or some kind of database to hold your information. Obsidian now becomes your new database. Yeah. So once you're able to set that up within Obsidian, the next thing is within Node-RED. Again, these are just simple network request calls. I have here an inject node, and I have here this query. I'm just calling it Jarvis for now. And I have the HTTP request, and we can dynamically send a query. And you can see that that triple bracket query is going to be replaced with Jarvis or whatever you dynamically have set going through your flow. You have the HTTP headers, and we're outputting as JSON. And then when we run it, you're going to see that it's going to fetch that information. So here it goes. So now in the payload, you can see that there was 19 different instances that it found, and it returns to me the file name and all of the different matches that it has. And to be honest, you see the score there. I'm not entirely sure what the score is, but all I do know is that it works really, really well. This is fantastic. So this gives me the ability to search for anything within my Obsidian files. It lets me take action on it. For instance, being able to not just read it, but to write new information to it, create new, update existing docs, as well as delete docs. I don't do the deleting because that feels pretty dangerous in this scheme of things, but definitely I'm able to create automations to say that, hey, make a note for me to say X, Y, and Z. And when you couple that with AI, because AI can kind of expand on what you're thinking about, it's generating docs for me and placing it inside Obsidian. It's mind blowing and magical when you get it working. So here, this is how I'm using it both as a trigger and a command. Let's see if this goes through. So I'm in Obsidian, and I have this document here called Smart Home Preferences. And in it, I just outlined a few of the preferences that we have here in my home. Now, what I mentioned for the reading aspect of this, of the three R's, is that reading, you're supposed to have a trigger, and that trigger will fire, and the output from the reading section or the reading phase should be some kind of command. And I also mentioned that with Obsidian, it has the special ability of being both a trigger and commands, if you will. So let's see what that means here within Node-RED. I have here this section that will load my preferences into memory. So this is now just pure time-based, or let's call it a time-based. This is a time-based trigger. This is using the inject node, and I give it the file that I want to search for. This is the smart home preferences, the same file that's here. And it's going to start 2 seconds after the server restarts. After 2 seconds, it's going to make an HTTP request using the same plugin that I mentioned from before, the local REST API for Obsidian. It's going to use that and it's going to call the vault/home command. And this will search within the vault, look for the home folder, and it's going to search for the file name, which we've designated from earlier, which was the smart home preferences. It's going to store that data locally within Node-RED, and we're going to output that information here in the debug. So let's give it a try. We're going to deploy. Sometimes it takes a while. All right, now 2 seconds later, we see that we have this debug. We see it for the smart home preferences, and you can see the contents. I like the AC between 69 and 72, and I like the AC between 69 and 72. So information is here. This worked. Now, as I mentioned, Obsidian can be a trigger. I have a special node or a special plugin for Obsidian that allows me to basically pick up on any of the changes that happens to documents. And we can see that here within this section of the automation. I have here Fire Obsidian Events. Now with my special plugin, if I make any changes to the document, so let's say I want to add in something new. So I make a change and I want to turn off the lights at midnight, for instance. Well, if I were to leave and then wait a few seconds, let's just clear this really quick. There it goes. There it goes. We can see that we have this triggered, it's been modified, and we can see the data. Turn off the lights at midnight. This is the new thing that we had just added. So now, instead of just looking at triggers for, let's say, motion events or time or lights or whatever we typically look at, we now can make events or trigger actions based off of changes to Obsidian documents. You could just watch the events for Obsidian, and if you see a specific file change or specific things within a file that you're particularly looking for, you can trigger off of that. The sky's the limit. But now for the reading section, not only can we use Obsidian to trigger the automation and trigger the whole reading process, but the contents within Obsidian can act as the commands for the future parts of the 3 Rs. We can have an automation that will actually turn off the lights at midnight and run that independently. And the same thing for at 9 p.m. Turn off the lights in Alora's room. Like all of these itself can be commands. Obsidian is now pulling double duty. Amazing. One thing to call out is that this, even though I'm showing this with Node-RED, you can technically do this within Home Assistant. Home Assistant have the REST command and RESTful commands, which lets you basically set up HTTP endpoints to, let's say, talk to these Obsidian URLs that I've showed you earlier. And then you can trigger that within your automations within Home Assistant natively. So you don't have to use Node-RED for this. This is something native that Home Assistant by itself can leverage, which I think is pretty awesome. So now that we have the commands coming from the reading phase, this kind of leads us to the reasoning. And the reasoning part is my favorite. I do want to be cognizant of everyone's time, so I'm going to go a little bit quick. But again, don't worry. You're going to be able to rewatch this within the community. At the end, I'm going to give you the link so you can get access for those of you that don't have it. And then you're also going to get the automations. Like some of the automations that you see here, I'm going to have snippets for you to basically download and bring into your own Node-RED environment so you can utilize for yourself. But the reasoning phase, once the command comes out of the reading phase, so remember, reading is going to output some kind of text command. The reasoning phase is responsible for finding the automation that would best deal with whatever's been asked for. And these down here, as you see, is basically pointing to a bunch of different business logic. And business logic is nothing more than just automations. You would have an automation that is dedicated for, let's say, dealing with changing the lights, maybe one that's for making announcements, whatever it may be. The idea is that these automations are kept as dry as possible. They do one thing and one thing very well, and they're very simple. So these are examples of what that may look like. So I have with that I've been experimenting with is like being able to change the modes of the house, being able to answer questions, making announcements, running tasks in the future. Whenever there's a command that comes through the system, after the reasoning kind of looks at it, AI is looking at it and saying, okay, because of this, I think, let's say, making an announcement is the best course of action, and it's going to run it. And one of the things that make this possible is the idea of an interface. I won't go into what that means for this now, but the idea is that because these logics are independent and very separate, there is one way that the logic gets spoken to, and that information that comes through allows all of this stuff to work. And I'm gonna actually let's kind of dive into that. I'm gonna show you. Notice the green nodes here. These green nodes are based off of AI intent, which is a special node that I created that lets AI determine what to do and call specific automations or flows locally. And this is done by the choreographer. Choreographer, or the choreography pattern, is just a way in which we can it's a pattern in which we can use to make complex interactions simple. That's the simplest way I can kind of put it. The purpose of the choreographer, in the most simplest terms, is it's supposed to find the best automation to run for a given command. And this call intent that you see here in the corner, its job is to call what you saw before, these different green nodes. So when AI says, okay, I've been told to turn on the lights, it's going to see that it has access to change the house, make an announcement, run things in the future, and there's probably a change lights command that's sitting somewhere close by. There we go. Yeah. It will then look at all the different automations and call it. What makes this also a little bit more robust is that, as I mentioned with the reading phase, you are able to pass in contextual information. So the name of the person who's calling, maybe the location, all of this helps this chat node or this LLM node to determine what automation is best to call. Okay, so with all of that being said, I want to kind of give you a high level idea as to how this works. I want you to see this in action. I'm going to demonstrate the reasoning aspect of this setup. Now, this is going to use my phone. It's going to use a shortcut, or it's going to execute a shortcut that's going to trigger a webhook. That webhook is going to send my voice, or the text of my voice, to the system, where it's going to call here change lights. It's going to execute this particular business logic. Now, we're relying on the choreographer to correctly identify what I want and to call the correct business logic. And when it's done, well, we'll talk about that afterwards. But that's what we're going for. Let's give it a try. Turn off the left and right office light. All right.
Turning off the office light, left.
All right, so you can see that both lights turned off. Let's turn them back on. Turn on the left and right office lights. Back on.
The left office light has been turned on.
All right, let's talk about it. As I've kind of demonstrated, during the reading phase, I spoke into the phone. The phone has, you can use shortcuts. The shortcut basically transcribed my voice into text, so it went speech to text. That was sent out as a command. And because it's coming from my phone, it knows that I'm the one sending it. And due to like ES presence in my room, it knows where I'm at as well. So then all of that gets sent to the choreographer. The reading phase is now done. It sends the command as text. The choreographer's job is to find, based off of that command, what is the best thing to run. And as you can see, it finds the change lights, this business logic or automation, and it says, okay, that's the best thing to run. It's going to now pass that information along to the this particular section. Something that I would call out is, if you've seen Home Assistant and the way that they have their like you can add Olama or any LLM to Home Assistant natively. But one of the things that I didn't really like about it is that you have a section that it's like a large let's call it section that tells it these are all of the entities, these are all of the exposed entities, these are all the commands that you can do, and it's very large, and that gets sent every single time you have to interact with the LLM through Home Assistant, which is fine. I think by now, I believe I remember reading a documentation from OpenAI that they have things caching. So if certain things are static long enough, it'll cache it and you would use less tokens. And if you're using Olama, I'm not sure if they have something similar, and I guess it wouldn't matter too much. I guess the only thing you'd care about is the latency. But the idea is that all of this gets sent every single time whenever you need to talk to something locally within Home Assistant. But by utilizing it this way, by having these separations of concerns, when the choreographer runs and it's simply looking to see what it can do, it only has the short amount of information that I mentioned, the command, as well as maybe some contextual information like who's calling it and where that person is. Once it determines that, hey, I need to change the lights, when it calls its operate home, there's another chat in here. And this section, because it's encapsulated, its whole purpose is to just do that job. So instead of it giving it everything, it's only going to pass lights. I can scope it down and say that I only want lights to be sent because that's your only job. It's a principle, like what's the security principle? The what's it called? The principle of least access or something to that effect. I always forget the name, but it's the idea that whenever you have to give something security clearance, you don't give them everything. You only give them specifically what they need in order to do the job, and that's what gets happened here. Each one of these business logics only passes to the AI specifically what it needs in order to get the job done, which means that I consume way less tokens. And then from a security point of view, I can now say that, hey, this is okay for, let's say, OpenAI to handle or for Gemini to handle, but for this one, I only want Olama. This is too sensitive information. I only want Olama to handle this, but I can do that. I can separate this out. Whereas I'm not sure how that can be easily done within Home Assistant natively. But this was one of the really cool things that I discovered when kind of going through this process. And again, the choreographer has a ton of different options to choose from. So the idea is that the LLM that you're using needs to be smart, it needs to be robust, and pretty consistent. So utilizing like the lower versions of, like, let's say, was it like, I think I used like Llama 3.1, like the 8 billion parameter one. Like I don't have super hard, like intense hardware, so it often gets things wrong. But I'm hoping that one day, once these GPUs become super accessible, that Olama would be able to handle everything that what you're seeing here natively, and it doesn't have to leave anywhere. But until that point in time, I'm still exploring and testing things out, and the idea is just that. If things need to change, it's super easy to change it, and I don't have to worry about everything else breaking because of how well encapsulated everything is. So just to kind of recap, you can use AI within this section. It's super powerful, and AI intent makes it very easy to separate the concerns and call what needs to be called at the appropriate time with the appropriate amount of information. But something that you should also note is that this principle can also work without AI. The idea of being able to see information and then call something or say this is the best thing to call, that's nothing more than a bunch of if statements or switch statements. So if you wanted to keep things local, your choreographer could just be hard-coded switch statements for specific things that you know that you would need to deal with. And whether you interpret the commands coming from wherever through regex or through Home Assist or through the native Home Assistant intent, what do they call it? Assist. However you do that parsing to determine what all of this concept of the choreographer and these different business logic will work with standard automations. So whether you use AI or not, I think this is useful for anyone moving forward. One other thing I should call out is that because you see that they're kind of encapsulated and split apart, this does mean now that you're able to call or string a bunch of LLM, or let's call it commands, automations together. Even though, let's say, I may call turn on the lights, if let's say a command is more complex and requires more things to be called, they can be called, they can be strung together. And if it makes sense, again, if you have, let's say, a really complex, let's say you have an existing complex automation, you can break it down into simple parts and have them daisy chain together without any concerns. So I also think that's pretty useful as well. Let's get to responding. This is the simplest one out of the three, and this is just simply how your home responds back to you. Now, responding back requires context and almost common sense, if you will. The idea is that depending on what automation you're running, you just have to be cognizant as to what's the best way for you to get information back. Now, imagine if you were to make a command or send a command out to Home Assistant. One of the things that frustrated me is that sometimes I don't know if it actually did what I told it to do. Like if it's not responding back, I don't know if it heard it. I don't know if something went wrong along the way. I don't know anything. So this responding aspect is very important from a user experience aspect, and it can be mixed and matched. So for instance, I think I mentioned earlier that you may start an automation with, let's say, text, and it may end in text. You may start it with voice, and it may end in text. Like, depending on what the circumstances, you can kind of figure out what works best for you. And it's highly configurable in the sense that maybe during the day you want things to respond via voice, but then after, let's say, 9 p.m., it only needs to respond via text. This section handles that. And because the LLM, or from the reasoning phase, it's outputting all of the information that you need. The responding phase is just specific to say, hey, okay, I see that it came from here. This is how I need to respond. The next demo is going to show you how all of this comes together. I'm going to take all of these concepts of reading, the reasoning, the responding. I'm going to put it together and show you how I was able to solve a real world problem that my wife was having at home. But first, I do want to remind you that at the end, I'm going to give you the link to enter for those of you that aren't that don't have full access. For instance, if you had full access, you would be able to see this curated automation section and some of this other stuff. If you're not able to see that, this is where this webinar is going to sit. Once it finishes, uploading and or downloading and coming back to me, I'm going to put all of this information inside this curated automation section, along with a lot of the automations that you saw here, and you'd be able to access it, rewatch it, do what you want with it, download it. It'll be yours to handle and take care of. All right, so let's see how all of this comes together. This was pretty exciting for me, so I hope you kind of like it too. Let me set the scene for you. So if you haven't seen my videos on YouTube, essentially one of the last videos that I posted was around an issue that my wife was having, and she came to me for help building an automation to solve it. Now, she has some work coming up and a lot of things are changing within her schedule, and she wanted an automation that would help her keep track of what's going on, particularly as she's homeschooling and also doing other activities. She wanted to use the automation to tell her when certain things are supposed to be happening and when she needs to be transitioning to other activities. Now, this is technically very easy to do, right? You can go into any of the apps, Google, Lady A, whatever it may be, and you can manually create the automations. And I had her do that, and it was fine, right? She was able to do it. There was some hiccups. Google did not really work out as best as she thought it would. And then she also found out that, her schedule's still on like a bi-monthly basis would need tweaking. So that wasn't convenient. The way that it's set up, going into an app, changing all of the requirements wasn't convenient at all. The other way is for me to do it, right? We have Home Assistant. I can go into Home Assistant and I can just create the different automations. At this time, do this. At that time, do this. All of that would have been fine. But the issue that I have with that is that it is rigid. It's strict. And she doesn't have access to it. Like, even though she has Home Assistant, like I have it on her phone, we have dashboards, she's not going to create an automation. It's too cumbersome. It's too cumbersome and clunky. It's not for her. A very poor user experience. I also can't have her use Node-RED, so it's no use for me to build it there either. This is where AI comes in. Now, using AI, the hypothesis that I had was, since I can use AI to interpret commands and to run things, what if the commands themselves were automations and the AI could essentially build the automations and then save it and then run it at a future time? Essentially becoming an agent, hearing a command, taking it, and then dynamically calling other commands in some non-deterministic way to solve a problem. And here's where all of this comes together. This sounds complicated, but but it's not. It has its drawbacks, but it's still very fun and it's still very effective. Here's how this works. So here within Node-RED, same principles that I've been showing you from the very beginning. We have the reading aspect, right? So we have a node that will trigger at the beginning of every server reboot. And one of the things it's going to do is it's going to load a file into memory. This particular file is called schedules. This schedule file sits within Obsidian. And here she can type out all of her schedule, just plain as day. If she needs to change something, it's a text file. It's just plain English. She can change it however she wants. Once it's changed and the server reboots, it's going to call AI and say, hey, I have this file from Obsidian. I need you to work with it. And that sends it to the choreographer. Now remember, we're now in the reasoning phase. We've read the information, it's now stored, we're passing all of the commands within the Obsidian file to the reasoning section. In the reasoning section, the choreographer is going to say, hey, I see all of these commands, let me find the best automation to deal with this. And because this is schedule-based, there is a particular business logic that's meant for scheduling. That's called the run in the future business command or automation. This one is crafted to use the cron plus node, and the cron plus node is essentially a dynamic way for us to create a cron job. And if you're unfamiliar with a cron job, that is a way for computers to schedule events, and it's good for scheduling like really repetitive tasks like system updates, running scripts, things to that nature. And you can now use it here within Node-RED to just schedule anything, to be honest. And in my case, I'm creatively using it to schedule an automation. So the AI is going to call, hopefully, this run in the future, and this is going to generate all of the different let's call it automations that needs to be ran in the future, and it's going to store it in that cron plus. And you can see here already they have something stored. If I double click into it and click dynamic schedules, you can see all of the schedules that got generated. But I'm going to demo this to you. Let's do something new and let's see it work in action. I'm going to update this to simply say in the next minute, turn off the lights in the office. That's where I'm at right now. So in the next minute, we're going to turn off the lights in the office and let's deploy this. All right. So we can see that this has started running. Schedules. That went off really fast. Nice. Yeah. So it did it at the top of the next minute. So that worked out. It did it right there in 13 seconds because that's how much time was left for the top of the minute. So this is well. If I told it to say, hey, turn it off at a specific time, it's going to change. Actually, let's do it. Right now, it's the top of the minute. So let's go back. 56 p.m. Turn off the lights in the office. Or turn on all the lights in the office. Let's redeploy this. Looks like there's 20 seconds left. Let's see if it'll make it. Looks like it's running. Oh, it's going to be really close. Yep, setting it for 11:56, and it just changed. Man, that's amazing. That is amazing. That is so freaking amazing. So yeah, this is the wholesome total of it. One thing that was missing out of this was the reading aspect, letting the user know when something was done. That's a very easy fix, especially for something like this. As a matter of fact, you haven't seen it here, but let's bring up Telegram. What you haven't seen here is 11:55. I got a message saying that my preference has been updated. That's it. It didn't have to be anything special. I don't need it to ring on the throughout the speakers every single time. Like, it's technically up to you. All of this, everything that I've showed you, These are just building blocks. You can use it how you see fit to fit your particular use case, but all of these can be used together to solve a very unique problem that is for you. And, or you don't use it at all. That is up to you. That is entirely your prerogative. But the point is, for one, as you can see, this is exciting. The fact that we have all of this technology at our fingertips that we can use and bend to our will, we can set up what a real experience should look like. We can set up what the bar should be for these companies that are going to come after us and try to build something. Like they're already trying. Even now, like we're doing this webinar now, and Apple has delayed. Look how long Apple said that they were going to have their Apple Intelligence, their AI, and that has not dropped yet. They've been delaying that over and over and over again. They're trying to figure it out. They're trying to make it good. It's not an easy thing. And I'm very curious to see how they're going to actually deliver on it, seeing that they're taking this long. I'm very curious to see the problems that they're running into, because I'm certain that they ran into problems. And as a matter of fact, let's go talk about the problems right now. Let's move on. So objections, right? I've with all the videos that I've put out, I've seen reoccurring themes in the comments. One of which is around Node-RED. Like, there's a lot of folks that just don't seem to like Node-RED, and that's fine. I'm not saying that they need to use it. I'm just saying, look how cool it is. If you want to use it, come here. I didn't build it. I have no stake in the game. I have no dog in this fight. I'm just saying, I'm just having fun in my kiddie pool over here. But it's not lost upon me the different nuances that come with utilizing Node-RED. For instance, some of the things called out is like, it's another point of failure. It's not intuitive for some. I know for the big one for me that I completely understand is that people need to understand JSON a little bit. And if you're used to looking to YAML, JSON may look a little bit scary. And then some people just prefer keeping everything with inside Home Assistant, which again, I understand completely. All of these are understandable stuff. And I'm not saying that you need to use this. I'm hoping that at a certain point that Home Assistant will get to the point where the stuff that you've seen me do within Node-RED, that I can easily replicate that within Home Assistant. I would love that. I would love to just scope down all of those things to just into one location. But at the current point in time, it's not there. We're not there yet. But again, I will say that despite the objections, I wanted to do something to help people, to make it more flexible for folks to use, as well as to bring them to where I'm at. And I realized that that's just a knowledge gap. So one of the things that I created was the Node-RED Made Simple course for Home Assistant users in particular. For those that have taken it, there are several folks that have made it all the way through the end, and the responses that I got back from it was quite frankly amazing. There are still things in there that I would love to update and fix, but I'm just one person, and it's slow going. So there's certain things that I want to make a little bit more robust, so you can have even less to think about. But I think the biggest stuff in terms of like learning it has been taken care of. There's scripts, like for every lesson, there are scripts that you can download and install into your Node-RED instance. So you don't have to stop and pause and play and kind of do the painstaking thing of like building it yourself. Hours have been saved by me just giving you all of those particular scripts, and you can just simply watch the video to gain context as to how it works. There's a ton of information inside there, a lot of downloadable stuff, free supplementary online tools that I kind of point you to so you can kind of get the most out of Node-RED. And I also show you within there how you can start leveraging AI. Like, it's the beginning portions of, for those that are really comfortable with Home Assistant and new to Node-RED, I show you how you can start bringing in AI into your flows in ways that are simple, easy, and not gimmicky. There's a few gimmicky things in there for those that want to kind of think outside the box. That's fine. But definitely my whole thing is that I want this is complex all by itself. Like, this is already complicated. And the only thing that makes automation's worth it, as we've all gotten into this, is one, yeah, there's a cool factor. We all want to put on our shades and be like, yeah, we're cool. But it was to solve a problem. Like, whether like you want to make sure that the lights are turned off because your kids leave it on, which my daughter leaves on the bathroom lights all the time. Just having an automation to say that, hey, even though you're not physically there, your home will take care of these particular things for you. And it just takes one less thing off of your mind, because life is already hard. So this expands that tool belt so much. So that's that one. And the one thing that I try to focus on with this is that I want to show you not everything that Node-RED has to offer. I don't really care about everything it has to offer. I want to show you the 20% that gives you the 80% of utility. Another objection that I've seen is like, why Obsidian over, let's say, a regular database, or why Obsidian, why not Notion? Like why Obsidian? One, Obsidian is local. I know that it's one of those things where people want to keep things local, and as do I. There's I don't remember the other thing that was called. There's another Obsidian alternative. I think it started with an N, and some of you may know what I'm talking about. Something log. Uh, it'll come to mind later, or you can kind of post it in your chat. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about. But ideally, it's the same concept where sure, you can use Obsidian and it has its own downsides. So for instance, in the automations that you've seen, there's a lot of times where it would start on server reboots, so it needs a way to pull. There's things could be easier, and especially since Obsidian is just text and it's unstructured, it's unideal for development because you would want something structured like a database, or using some kind of like NoSQL, CouchDB, AWS, like whatever it is. Like you'd want something structured, but if you do that, you can by all means go forward and do that. But I find that if you have a structured database, you gain the structuredness and you no longer need AI because everything is structured. So you can technically code for it normally, and it should work, and you get like high reliability, basically high use, and things become really stable. But then on the other side, what I find is that you don't get the usability that I was looking for. If this was just me, if the smart home was just for me, I would have this in a normal database, and I would have Obsidian off to the side and kind of utilizing that every now and then. But I want my wife to be able to use this. I want my kids to be able to use this, and they are not going to learn any of this stuff. It's already it's already so hard to get them to get on board with some of this other stuff that I have. And here's a fun story with all of this that I've set up. One of the things that happened was that while experimenting, the AI started acting a bit wonky and turning things off and on. You're going to find a video about that later on, but I end up putting the AI in an infinite loop. And what it started looking like in the house, I didn't realize what was happening at first, but lights would just turn off randomly. Like we'd have lights on, and then in like 15 minutes, a light would turn off. And we're like, why did that turn off? And that would happen all throughout the day. It turned out I had the AI in an infinite loop. Didn't even realize it. But this stuff here is there's so many stories that I have where things just kind of go crazy within the smart home. And if my wife needed to control something or to fix something, she'd have to wait for me to come home from work to do it. This gives her the ability to go in and make changes. So with that being said, I did come up with the Obsidian course that shows people, well, if you wanted to go down that route, here's how you can do it. And again, to make it very simple, and I think some of you, I've had conversation with some of you where, yeah, it's the one click and go, essentially. Like it runs in a Docker container. It will set up everything for you. You can connect it to your Home Assistant or to Node-RED. And actually, Node-RED is happening underneath the hood. So you don't even have to touch Node-RED, to be honest. Everything happens underneath the hood, and you can get access to Obsidian and making these changes. Like I try to, what I want to do is I want to make this simple for you guys to kind of adopt and to explore. I'm providing tools in your tool belt that will let you solve problems that I haven't even thought of. Because then the more tools that you have, you won't have to use your hammers to screw in a nail or to fix a window. Like you would have more things at your disposal. And quite frankly, the more exciting part for me is that by you guys understanding and using this and solving new problems and me witnessing that, it inspires me, and then I get new ideas, and it becomes like this infinite loop of like increasing the value that we have towards this community. Fantastic stuff. The last one here is AI. Like I think that's the biggest objection. People don't see the real use for AI, and I get it. That one I'm actually on board with this particular objection because it does complicate things. For a very long time, things were complicated here at my home. It does introduce a lot of failure points because AI is very fickle, and the way that you need to set it up without proper tools is just cumbersome. Like it's just extremely cumbersome. It can be costly if you're using like the really expensive models, or you're trying to go down that route, or even if you want to set up yourself like locally and use Olama or any of the local models. It's costly. And then it does introduce variability, and that can be a pro and a con. But in the case of like when you're dealing with structured maintenance or a structured code, you want to reduce the variability because you want something that's testable and easily reproducible and unambiguous. So I get that entirely, which is why I've been exploring this for quite some time now and started creating the Jarvis Blueprint. It's still under the development, but the idea is that I wanted to find, at least because this is such a new frontier, as I mentioned at the very beginning, I wanted to at least have my voice in the ring to say, hey, I know this is new, but here's a way that we can approach this. This is not the only way. I'm sure people are going to come up with even better ways, but to get the conversation going, to get the ball rolling, and to elevate the standards that we have, here's what we can do, and here's how this can work. And I'm hoping some of you, or anyone, to be honest, would take this and iterate over it and make it better, and then we can have something that's more robust and hopefully create something that's a little bit more click and go. Just simply tell the automation, hey, this is what you want to do, and it just does it. In the same way that I'm demonstrating, like I'm trying to head in that direction and make this extremely usable for everyone. So with those particular, with all of that in mind, right, for those of you that are looking to really explore this particular experience, or if any of those three things sound like something that you want to get into, I would like to offer you something that I really think that you're going to like. Automation Trilogy is a 3-step framework that will help you 80/20 your smart home journey. The deeper you dive, the more you learn about how to leverage Node-RED in creative ways to build automations that wouldn't be easily done within Home Assistant by itself. You'll learn how to use that in tandem with AI to create really unique automations that will elevate your smart home journey. And for those of you who don't really want to build automations in Node-RED, you're still able to leverage all of your automations that are in Home Assistant within Node-RED without having to do anything extra besides from adding, let's say, one or two nodes to simply trigger it. Like you can have the best of both worlds. With this framework, you also learn about Obsidian and how to leverage it to create like unique scenarios where you can not only store your information, whether it's text or your thoughts like to-dos, but you can also store automations and commands within there and use it in tandem with AI to create really dynamic interactions with your smart home, where you can set up things to run in the future and your smart home will be able to read it from Obsidian and just run with it. This introduces a really new dynamic to the way that you interact with your smart homes. And the thing that I love most about Obsidian is that it's just text-based. Anyone can use it. As long as you can read and write, you don't need to know anything fancy like any commands or how Home Assistant or anything niche. You just write. And if you build your automations right, you're able to leverage that really well within Home Assistant, Node-RED, just utilizing AI to bring it all together. And finally, the trilogy brings in AI through all of this. You're going to see AI as a common thread through each of these packages, but I've dedicated one package specifically to deep dive really advanced ways that you can utilize AI within your system. And the cool part about this is that even if you don't care about AI, the techniques that are there will definitely 10x the way that you write your automations. Just in general, for plain Home Assistant automations, you can create automations that can be leveraged within each other and be done in such a way that way you don't have spaghetti code or spaghetti automations where making a change in one automation breaks something else in another. You would learn these fantastic abstractions. I think this is, quite frankly, the best blend between computer science and software engineering and the smart home community. Very interesting and next level stuff. I haven't really seen anyone talk about this or anything out there suggesting these type of techniques. So a lot of value, even if you don't want to use AI, you're definitely going to learn a lot of cool new things to make your smart home more robust. Now, if this is something that you want to get into, just check the Tech Enthusiast community on the left-hand side and just look for the Automation Trilogy. You'll find a lot more information about that there. And I really hope you like it the way that I loved making it. You probably heard of the Automation Gold Standard mantra, but I would like to propose a change to it. A Perfect automation should be invisible, never noticed, never seen, only felt. While Home Assistant gives you the power to control lights, locks, and cameras, Node-RED lets you build an experience beyond Home Assistant, beyond big tech, beyond limitations. Your only limit will be your imagination, not platforms, brands, equipments, or integrations.
Can you create a document to track my workouts? You can call the document Gym Prep, and also create a workout routine that targets my back and buys, and put it onto a table.
You see?
Okay, Nabu. Play lo-fi hip-hop on the office speakers.
Playing lo-fi hip-hop on the office speakers.
Learn the techniques, and every ceiling becomes glass. No more waiting, only doing.